That kind of cult-like loyalty to Donald Trump is why Republicans chose Congresswoman Elise Stefanik as the new chair of the House Republican caucus. She replaces Liz Cheney, who is way more conservative than Stefanik, but who was purged because she would not stop telling the truth about Trump's lies about the 2020 election. As for Trump, he's still spreading the big lie in a tweet-like statement this weekend, lashing out at his former Vice President Mike Pence and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell for not overturning the election. Joining me now, Sophia Nelson, author of E Pluribus One, and one of the more than 100 Republican signatories to a call for American renewal, which threatens to form a third party. And Tom Nichols, opinion columnist for USA Today. Welcome back, both of you, to the Sunday show. Tom, you haven't been here for a while, so I'm going to start with you. Please explain how it is that a woman like Liz Cheney, who voted with Donald Trump 92.9% of the time, is not loyal enough to hold on to her Republican Party leadership and is replaced by someone who, if memory serves, is at about 77% voting with Donald Trump.
Because the Republican Party doesn't care about policy anymore. The Republican Party lives in fear of its primary voters and of the most extreme cult-like wing of its own voters. And what those other Republicans in Congress have said is, we need someone who shields us from President Trump's devoted followers, and Elise Stefanik will say anything in order to keep that job. And Liz Cheney keeps telling the truth, which makes everybody uncomfortable and which makes them embarrassed, and it makes them cognizant of what they've done, which they don't want to remember and they don't want to think about. So it from the point of view of protecting people who want to stay in Congress, for people who like living in the Emerald City, it makes perfect sense. As a matter of Republican politics or of conservative policy of any kind, it makes no sense at all.
Mm-hmm. Sophia, speaking to Tom's point about living in fear of Donald Trump, have a listen to this, what Congresswoman Cheney told Jake Tapper.
You have more members who believe in substance and policy and ideals than are willing to say so. And in some cases, I mean, if you look at the vote to impeach, for example, there were members who told me that they were afraid for their own security, afraid, in some instances for their lives. And that tells you something about where we are as a country.
And Sophia, so that fear isn't just fear of a tweet. That fear is much larger.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan, look, January 6th was a moment that I think shook us all to the core. I mean, at least I hope it did. And what Liz Cheney is doing right now is really brave. It's very Margaret Chase Smith-like, Margaret Chase Smith being the only woman in the Senate in 1950, taking on Joe McCarthy. And Liz Cheney's really standing in that vein. But I think that, to your point, the question really is, what is going on with members of Congress that they have so little courage that they don't understand that shrinking to this man, shrinking to the big lie, and going along with it does not protect the Republic. It does not honor the Constitution. And that is why they are there. They are not there to keep their jobs. They are not there to enrich themselves, engage in largesse, whatever it is that you want to call it. And I get the fear about your safety after January 6th. Every member of Congress should fear to some degree for their safety, right? Mm-hmm. Because we know that the Capitol can be breached. We know that it has been breached. And I think that's why this commission is so important, this bipartisan commission. And I think we're going to have to take a real hard look at where we are, like Liz says, in our basic civility in the public square, Jonathan. That's really what's at issue. Our basic civility in the political arena has gone to the dogs, for lack of a better way to say it. It's just in a really bad place.
Right. I was going to say, what civility, given, Marjorie Taylor Greene chasing AOC around the Capitol. Tom, so we're talking about the disarray within the Republican Party, which I would think under normal circumstances would have Democrats like this, watching, like praying, basically even thinking that, we got this. But can Democrats actually, let me rephrase the question. Will this what's happening within the Republican Party, will it help Democrats?
It should, but Democrats, and I'm sure Sophia and others have seen this from the other side. Republicans always count on Democrats to self-destruct. It's been kind of one of the secret weapons of the Republican Party, is that they have a cooperative adversary over on the other side. So it should, but it probably won't. And I am not confident at all about what happens in 2022 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the problem, I think, is that Democrats have mistaken a general loathing of Donald Trump and people being appalled at the Republican Party for approval of Democratic policies that a lot of Americans probably, certainly not in purple districts, aren't going to be very comfortable with. I think that the thing we learned in 2018 and 2020 is that as a Democrat, you can't go wrong focusing on Trump and the Republicans. This is one reason that I'm sort of glad that Trump keeps speaking up. It reminds everyone who this party answers to. I think, the Democrats who've said, let's forget about Trump, let's move on. No, that's what Republicans want to do, because they don't want people to realize that they are still, being made to dance, like a circus act in front of this guy. So, I actually think that the more Trump speaks up, the better. And if Democrats can just keep that focus on reminding people that they are the party that is fighting an authoritarian takeover of the United States government, then I think they'll do better.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes into the infighting about, how many dollars here and which policy there, and then I think people sort of tune that out, and the Republicans start regaining that natural advantage they have in the Electoral College.
Sophia, in the 30, go ahead, Sophia. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I would just add, in the 2022 midterms, it's all about who shows up at the polls. And that's why the Voting Rights Act, the Renewal John Lewis Act is so critical, that the Democrats hold the line on this, because if they don't, Kevin McCarthy is the next Speaker of the House. You heard it here. It's going to happen, because they're selling some really ugly stuff, socialism, cancel culture. It's a culture war, right? And they know that if they get the voters they want to show up, they win in 2020.
Sophia, you are so good that you totally anticipated the question I was going to ask, which was going to be about 2022. So with that, we'll leave it there. Sophia Nelson and Tom Nichols, thank you both very much for coming back to the Sunday Show.